Hello, everybody. I'm Masha Єфросиніна. I'm Ukrainian journalist, and this is my first interview, first in my life, in the YouTube studio, especially from the Munich Security Conference. And my first guest, I'd love you to present. Her name is Dюзен Tekkal. Am I right?
Yes, you're right.
German author, journalist, war correspondent, and many, many other things written about you. But Dюзен, if I would ask you just tell me, present you yourself in a couple of words. What would you choose among these?
So, my name is Dюzen Tekkal, and I'm a human rights activist because I have to become a human rights activist because of my religious people. So I belong to the Yazidi religious community, and I would say my life-changing moment was in 2014 when ISIS invaded our regions in Iraq. So I went there as a journalist, but I turned into a human rights activist overnight because of the genocide.
You know, my life also changed in 2014 because Russia came to Ukraine and there was the annexation of Crimea and Donbass, and then the war started in my country.
So we have so much in common.
We have
thinking
so many
about that
common
year,
things in our
2014.
activities because I'm doing a lot for women of Ukraine, children, and I hope we will have time to talk about this. But let's start from yesterday panel.
Yes.
You were the member of panel. Exactly, there was the Vladimir Klitschko and also Nadia Amadi. Yes,
Natalie Amiri.
Natalie
Yes.
Amadi. Sorry.
No
So
problem.
what is it? What is it dedicated to? This panel.
For us as a human rights organization, Hava Help, which we found out of the ashes of genocide, it was always clear that we have to be there when something is happening to other cultures, to other people. So when the Iran revolution begins, we were very loud because this slogan, Jinjian Azadi, belongs to a Kurdish movement who is now be using worldwide. And I think this is very, very important to find out how we can stand up against despotias, for example. And for us as Yazidis, it was very clear that we have to bring people together, a movement of freedom, of women's rights. And therefore, there was always this mutual understanding between Ukraine and our people, because you were talking about that in 2014 when you were in Maidan, and the Ukrainians were screaming, today they are doing that with us, but tomorrow you will be maybe the next ones. And we had the same pain at that time because it was when the genocide happened to our people. And therefore, I think it's very important to talk about issues, challenges, and problems when it's happening and not when it's too late. And therefore, it was for us very interesting to make this line between the evil twins, Russia and the Mullah regime. Yeah. So there is a big connection between them, as we know, as you know better than me, but we don't talk about the fact how we can defend that and what is our answer, especially in Western countries, for example. And therefore, we were talking together with Vladimir Klitschko, who just came from Ukraine, and Natalie Amiri, who is a well-known author, also from Iran, who was living in Tehran. So I think that Russia and the Iran or the regime have so much in common, propaganda, and especially, and this is something which I find very important, this kind of being against life. So when I'm looking at Russia television and see journalists, like a very popular one, who's talking about the fact that life is not so important. Life is not so important. Just imagine what that means.
Keeping their children in Europe in a very, very bad West, and not allowing them even to come to Russia, especially not to go to die. They want Russian people to die, and they do it greatly. So do you think that this mix of this union of Russia and Iran just makes the power of dictatura and of the enemies, I think, of the world? Because Ukraine and Iran are the most hot spots on the map of our world where the awful genocide is now holding on. Do you think this power can be destroyed?
I think we have to. So what is the other choice to make that clear? And I think what is very important also here in Europe is the understanding that what is happening in Ukraine is more than for the people in Ukraine. It's a worldwide problem against all us. So what is coming from Russia or from Iran is dangerous for all of us. And when we talk about the fact that life is not important anymore, what does it mean? It reminds me to that, for example, what the ISIS fighters always said, because they are not living for this world, they are living for the other world, for example. So we have the same issues in Iran, in this mullah regime who is killing their own people, for example. And of course, this kind of propaganda saying is like psychological to make clear to the Russian population, your sons have to die because life is not so important, of course. So therefore, I think there's just one answer, but one powerful answer, and that is Jinjian Azadi. Women, life, freedom, the will to survive. And I was so impressed from Vladimir Klitschko, who was talking about that yesterday. And I think we have a big responsibility also here in Germany, in our media, when, for example, when we are talking about Zelensky, what he wants. And sometimes I have a understanding of that people want to blame him because he needs weapons, but to survive. So without weapons, maybe Ukraine isn't here anymore in the future. So we are talking about an ongoing genocide. And this is something which we have to make clear, that the Ukrainians are not just fighting for themselves, they are fighting for all of us.
And for sure, Ukrainians are fighting. They're not just asking for weapons. They use this weapon and not asking for anything else except weapons, aircrafts, and so they are showing during a year how they fight, continue living. As you can see, I'm traveling, talking. I make the information, my own information war against propaganda. So we continue showing the world that we are moving. We just need the support. And even our conversation is also the support. Even my presence here in this studio is also the support for Ukrainians. But you talked about one of the main activities of yours is women power and women rights and children rights. Let's talk about a little bit about this. I know that you have the experience of being refugee when you were young girl. Now in Germany, especially in many countries of Europe, there are a lot of refugees. I traveled with my children. I traveled through different countries, and the system for refugees is it's opened, but when you go deeper, it's not so easy because you have problems with the language, with the social help, with the personal reaction for people. There are Ukrainians everywhere. In Poland, there are about 2 million of Ukrainians. And what would you recommend to refugees to stand all these problems? How to stand all these problems we are had to.
I think what we try with our help is to make clear that there is no place for competition between refugees. This is something very important because when the Ukrainian people came, I heard sometimes from people from Middle East that there are some issues which are not fair. So what have we tried to do? We brought them all together. And I think this was a very big and special and important moment together with many more, for example, Project Together. And there were about 10,000 people who came together. And it was clear when they saw each other and were connected to each other that the pain is international. And of course, the experience to know how it feels to be a daughter of refugees, because I was born and raised here, but the fact that I was born and raised here was not enough to be German enough. So therefore, I think this is the fight of our life, to make clear that we all belong to this country and that we are all together a German dream. This is, for example, the reason why we find out a nationwide education initiative. It calls German Dream, and it's, of course, more than an initiative. It's a movement, and it's a fight for bringing people together and to make clear that we all belong to this country. And many people of us, of course, we had struggles on the one hand, but we had also a society and a Germany who opened the hearts for us. And of course, we have also the other side. But what I find very important is not always to talk about the issues, challenges, and problems. Of course, we have to do that, and there is a big difference, and we have a lot of to do, but also to talk about what is going on in a good way and what we can do together to go forward, for example. And sometimes when people have, like kind of discriminations against other people, we try to bring them together, because in times of wars of information, digitalization, I think it's very important to make clear that these pictures of enemies are very, very dangerous. For example, even genocide, it always begins with the pictures of enemies. And
what do you mean?
It starts with the pictures of enemies and
In social media?
In social media, for example. And then step by step by step, we come in situations which are very awful for all of us. So I think what is very important is to make clear that we are living in one world, and the people in Ukraine are not just fighting for themselves, they are fighting for a universal world. So sometimes we are talking about Western values, but I think we don't have Western values. They are international.
Do you hear that we are moving to these narratives here, especially in this Munich conference? Do you hear it here?
I hope so, of course. And that is the reason why we came here, because I think it's very important to take part also at the human rights organization from civil society movements, and to make clear that the power of women is also very important, because I think we are, of course, we are a part of it all. And it was very challenging in the last year. So it's not that clear when we are talking about journalism or the places where we are. So I'm a war reporter, for example, in Iraq. I was in Syria, and we were the only ones. So when I came to Iraq the first time, I just saw men who were talking about the women, the Yazidi women who have been raped. And I said to my sister, where are the women? Where are the Yazidis? Where are the people who are from the culture to make the decisions? And I think this is also very important, that we are part of power, and we are not, we don't go away from that. And for example, you were talking about the fight and the special role of the woman. We always talk about context in war with the women as victim, but this is much more. I saw many women who are agents of change, who became agents of change. For example, when the genocide was happening against our people, we had so many women who broke the silence. Women like Nadia Murad, like Nejla Mato, who said, I'm Nadia Murad, this is my name, I have been raped, but I don't feel shamed about that, because the perpetrators was doing that to me. So that was not just breaking a taboo, it was like a kind of revolution. And I think the fact that we get the recognition of the genocide from the German parliament, which was very historical a few weeks before, was because of the fight of our women, because they went forward and they were so strong and they became agents of change. And I see the same, for example, in Ukraine. So by the fighters, we have 22% who are women, for example. And of course, this is very important, I think.
Yeah, sure. The women power is increases greatly in Ukraine. But as far I am the UN ambassador in Ukraine, and before the full invasion, I was my main activity was against domestic violence. But for now, during this year, we found out a lot of cases of sexual war crime, and Ukrainian women, they were raped, and they didn't tell about this because first of all, this was this level of tortures and rapes that women want to forget about. And another thing is that this let's call them men, Russian occupants, they did it in such an awful and animal manner that just losing their fights on the fields of war, they were showing their power, just raping our women. And this was terrifying and awful, and police and they're still analyzing this. But what I want to tell you, maybe talking about your experience in this topic, maybe you could recommend what rehabilitation, what words, what process do we need to do just to make our women to get this help, to get this rehabilitation, just to start talking about this, because this is a great, an awful war crime that we have to fix, we have to talk about, like you talking about your women.
I think what is so important is to make clear always that rape as a weapon of war is not a less of crime. It's the worst. It's the worst against the women, the men, and the whole nation and folk and region. And therefore, what the ISIS survivors said to me was, we don't always need psychological help because we are not ill. My best medicine is justice. We need juridical justice. So, for example, the fact that every one of the people who are living in Iraq and Syria, they don't speak English, but every one of them knows the word genocide. And it's important for them. They said to me, we survived because we have to tell our stories about our perpetrators and what happened to us. They dehumanized us. They made things with us which, like, dehumanization. But till we are living, we have to talk about that, because Nejla Mato, for example, I saw her yesterday. I bring her together with Vladimir Klitschko, which I found very important. And I saw her and I was crying, really, because I said to myself, a few weeks before, I was together with Nejla in Iraq by the mass graves of her parents, for example. And she was so sad and full of fear. And now I saw yesterday this self-confident woman who's standing there, and she always said, I'm stronger than ISIS. I survived because I chose surviving, living Jinjiyan Azadi. So this, I think, this is the reason why it's so important, because we can take it universal. And it's always like, oh, thank you so much, you helped the women from ISIS captivity. No. They helped us because they went forward and we were behind them. And she always said, they killed my father, my mother, but it's about my dignity. And of course, this was a development. In the beginning, there was a lot of fear, but then day by day, we find out that she needs more trust and more possibilities. The other thing is, we have, for example, with Hava, women empowerment centers in Iraq, 3. And what we hear there always is, we need possibilities, we need jobs, we need power, we need hope, we need something here for our future. We need the possibility to go back to our regions, but then when the war is happening, we don't have another choice. So not everyone wants to come to Europe, but when everything is disturbing, of course you need like a chance. But the most important thing is that they always say, don't forget us. Don't forget what was happening to us and include us. And this is something what we always try with Hava Help, to bring all together. So many women from Iran, for example, were there yesterday, also Yazidi women, also Ukrainian. And I think then something begins which is very strong. And I think there's nothing more strong than bringing these people together from many different places to make clear that this is our strongest answer against despots like Russia or the Mullah regime, because what they try to do is against the Western.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
I would love to add also, don't victimize us.
Yes.
Don't victimize us, because we have strength and power to fight and need some more weapon. I don't want to end like this. Just can you tell me, who is your role model?
I think my grandma was someone very special for me. Yeah, she was 107 years old. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And she had a very exciting life. She was living at the Turkish-Syrian border, where the region now, which is very awful with the earthquake, of course, but she was like a special woman. She had her own rights. She was like a she-man in a good way.
How did she manage going through so many tragedies and so many problems? How did she manage to keep loving?
I think this is this
life?
is the place where resilience begins. And sometimes when I feel sad or I have this kind of feeling that no one is understanding what we are doing or we have to fight more, I'm always think about my mother and my grandma and my parents, and I know how challenging their life was, and I know that there was a life without dignity, because being a Yazidi in these regions means to fight for surviving. And when I see what they have done for us, we were born and raised here. I have 10 siblings. We are 11. And everyone is doing something right now for our culture, for this country together. It's always a fight for living. And I think there's nothing stronger than a big yes to love and to life, and not in a pathetic way, because of course we know how pain feels. But this is my deep experience, especially by the ISIS survivors. We are talking always about victimizing and what is happening to them in a bad way, but let's talk about the other things.
Absolutely.
And for example, also with the ISIS survivors, we are fighting together, but also we are laughing together, and we are living together, and we go forward together.
Living,
and I think this is something which is very, very important also here in our Western countries, that even life is not something which we can take for granted. It's like like something which we have to be thankful for. And this is something which I try to remember myself every day. And I think this can help our work as well. And of course, the chances to use them, to go in and to live the dreams sounds sometimes very easy, but I think there's no more difficult than to try this day by day. And also not for yourself, this is the last thing, for other people together.
Thank you so much, Dюзен. Thank you so much. And I'm talking about the dream of every Ukrainian right now, and about justice. Dюзен said we need justice. Yes, we need one justice, only one case, to see Putin and his people in jail. That is about justice. And we will continue fighting for women rights and for people rights. Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you.